Welcome to this edition of Let's Talk Winnipeg. We've got Jamil with us today, who is the new Executive Director. 3 months in the position. We were just having a brief conversation before this started about that, and has really, truly hit the ground running. Recently, Jamil presented to us at City Council for the March meeting, and a very well done presentation, very thoughtful, very well researched, obviously, and to the point. So we're going to talk about not just Jamil himself, but we're going to talk about the Main Street project, and really, I think it's important to know everything that the Main Street project does, because I think a lot of people feel it covers one or two items. It's a place for people to go at night that are seeking refuge, that are dealing with some issues themselves and looking for help. But I know that it's much more than that. I've been there a couple of times, and I'm amazed at the work that gets accomplished and just how important it is to our community. So, Jamil, thank you so much for doing Let's Talk Winnipeg. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. So we talked about you being there for 3 months, and you know, you're kind of hitting the ground running. What were your objectives when you agreed to take this position, which we're all grateful you did? What were your objectives, your thoughts, you know, taking this role that you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah, I think I always have like some pretty lofty goals in terms of the general future of Main Street project, but I think one of the great things about taking on executive director role is it's not necessarily what you want to happen. It's about kind of making sure you can build that collective vision and voice and direction for the future. So, I mean, things that I kind of want to see, you know, I want to see a super well-functioning organization. That's important to me, like that the administration and all aspects of the organization function in a really efficient but also effective way. And so an organization that has proper supports for staff and kind of a built-in key components, recognizing that, you know, this is crisis work, and that crisis work comes with a lot of, you know, additional trauma, vicarious trauma. And so I want to make sure that one of the things I hope that as we move forward in the future, we can build kind of a strong support system for our staff, you know, strong training, but overall goal is to operate super transparently. I think organizations like Main Street Project and all not-for-profits should operate in a way that isn't, that is super clear what we do, how we do it, and our direction. And we make mistakes, we let people know we made mistakes, we correct them, and we move forward. And I think this is challenging work, and it's never going to be done perfectly. And I don't think anyone should expect that or does, but I think it's important that we kind of chart a clear, transparent path forward as an organization. So that's one of the things I'm hoping we do. The other thing is a real strong direction. So we're about to embark on a strategic planning process, a new 5-year planning process. We're starting next month. And I'm super excited about that, to have super clear vision and direction for what Main Street projects should do. I think we've done a lot, and then we'll talk about that when we get to what we do, but we do a lot of work and maybe too much work at times that we aren't necessarily funded or supported for. And so we need to kind of make sure we're focusing on what our core operations are and then build better partnerships. I think we have some great partnerships. We have a great community. Obviously, like I've worked in the not-for-profit community before in my past jobs, and I love this community. Like the, you know, Winnipeg is so lucky to have this community that just cares and will go above and beyond. You know, it doesn't matter what agency you work for or maybe the mandate of an agency. It's about what's best for Winnipeggers, and I'm excited about kind of building stronger partnerships here. Making sure that we have clear transitions from folks in our shelter to other services and other agencies. And so really that kind of a broader partnership kind of network model that it exists here, and there's lots of great work happening, but I think it can be done better and in a better way, and more supported and better communicated as to how the partnerships work. So I'm excited to be jumping into all these strategies that exist, like the end homelessness strategy, the Kikinoma. Like these are strategies that are great and have great potential to make real change in our city. And that's why I came to Main Street Project. I want to be part of big change in Winnipeg and making Winnipeg, especially for our most vulnerable, the best city it can be. So that's really what I came in with. And now the part is to hopefully we can reach that and achieve that as we move forward in a kind of planned, strategic way.
Those are not lofty goals at all. Those are excellent, excellent goals, and you've certainly, I think, set yourself up for a lot of work. But like you said, very, very much needed work. And thank you for sharing those. So when you talk to, and I'm going to go here right now because you brought that up. And when people listen to your goals and such, they probably don't realize just how much Main Street does do, what you're responsible for. I don't think that they realize that. So let's talk about the many things that Main Street does for our community and for members of our community that are seeking refuge and help.
Yeah, it's a big operation. So I think the kind of core work we do that a lot of people know is we run an emergency shelter program. And so, it's been a big change this year too. So it's like dynamic. It's changing at the end of this week or midweek. So we run an emergency shelter, the low barrier shelter. So it's really important. Our shelter doesn't come with any strings attached. You can kind of show up in whatever state you're in, and we will take you in and make sure you have a place. Our shelter is 24 hours a day. So we have daytime sleeping and nighttime sleeping. So it's a nonstop kind of operation. We only close for 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening to kind of clean and change the configuration of the space. Emergency shelter, it started at the beginning of this year with 70 beds and 3 washrooms and 1 shower at 75 Martha, which was our main building. And then with COVID, we quickly expanded. We had an opportunity to move into a warehouse at 190 Disraeli. And so we went from that to over 200 beds in a warehouse, which was quite an endeavor and I think an amazing thing. And so then we went to that model to, distance beds, make sure we had enough space so there was no big spread of COVID transmission. And we really weathered the COVID storm quite well in the homeless sector because of that. Being able to provide so many more beds spaced out in a larger space really saved lives and kind of prevented that outbreak throughout the whole homeless sector community. So we were pretty fortunate to be able to make that move, and through, generous offer of the building and other support from COVID funding strategies, we were able to get it up and running and staffing very quickly. And so then we quickly pushed the renovation of the Mitchell Fabrics building, which I know a lot of Winnipeggers know, a very iconic building in our city, corner of Logan and Main. We pushed that renovation really quickly forward so that we had shelter space there, updated. It's a beautiful space, and I still can't imagine how they did it in the time frame they did, from basically a 6-month renovation in that space. So there's still some work to be done, in terms of not the main shelter space, but like the basement and the roof and those kind of things. But for all purposes, the building's up and running in its state. And so that's a 120 bed shelter facility that has 10 washrooms and 6 showers. So really a lot bigger. It allows us to space beds. At Martha, we could only fit mats on the floor, and now we're in cots with mattresses. So, a real upgrade in terms of the type of sleeping accommodations we can provide for folks who are homeless. And then having more washrooms and showers is obviously a huge improvement for the city. And as we know, public washrooms and outdoor washrooms and all that stuff are very hot button issues in our city. And then when COVID closed and we saw all the restaurants close, people that would use McDonald's or Tim Hortons or these other locations as washrooms now didn't have that option, right? And so there was like a big gap. And I know we were able to provide some, porta potties outside and things like that, but being able to provide them within the shelter space and then more showers obviously provides a lot of dignity and respect. So we run, so now current operations, and as of March 31st, it'll be all of our shelters just at the one location, 637 Main Street, the Mitchell Fabrics building. We'll have 120 beds, so it'll be 90 male identified and 30 female identified beds. We're building a separate space for female identified folks to have a designated separate area. We're also going to be piloting a new thing, which I don't know if it's been done before, but having a space where folks who identify different non-male or female identified folks, also folks who have partners or a couple that want to stay together for their safety reasons. We're going to have a little bit of an area to have them be able to sleep next to each other, which normally isn't the case in shelter. So we're going to pilot over the next couple of months a kind of an area that allows for couples groups, you know, to kind of sleep in the same area as each other, because like that's one of the things that often drives people out into, you know, into the encampments or into the bus shacks that we've seen, is they want to stay with the people they trust and their safety networks. So if we can allow that to happen in shelter, we hope that'll kind of limit some of the, you know, some of the encampments or other kind of pop-up areas people find to stay together. So we really hope that being able to pilot a kind of different model in shelter with the space we have will bring that. So that's kind of shelter. We provide you know, food, clothing, all the basic necessities, access to that for folks. And then we also connect to our casework team. So the next area of Main Street Project is casework. We have a team of 10 caseworkers, and their job is to help move folks out of shelter, out of needing shelter, into, you know, more permanent housing, get them wraparound supports, get them into the healthcare system, get them access to healthcare. You know, there's a lot of those barriers for folks who are homeless. So our casework team is really kind of that wraparound support team, and they take referrals directly from shelters, but also we take referrals from partner agencies. So it's obviously not the size of the team we wish to have, but it's a team we have, and they're amazing. Our caseworkers, all our staff are amazing. I'll make sure I mention that as well. But our casework team work really hard to make sure that they support people longer term, getting access to their benefits. You know, we just I just found out, you know, today we ran a tax clinic on the weekend, and we, out of like 15 people we provide tax claim for, we were able to find about $30,000 of unclaimed GST or taxes for people. So that's money they should have had access to, and just be not having, you know, the proper access to tax services, we were able to do that. And that's just a one weekend, right? So having this kind of a little more intensive case management wraparound support work is super important. So that's our casework team, and they're kind of all over the place, and they kind of connect through every one of our areas. So there's caseworkers in shelter and detox and kind of every area, and they're supporting you know, transitioning folks and providing a little more stability for people. So that's shelter, that's casework. Then we do withdrawal management or detox services. So we run, I think, the only free detox, if not one of the only free detoxes in Winnipeg, and that's super important in terms of addiction and addiction recovery, having a place where you can detox. And a lot of addiction services require you to detox before you can access addiction services. And so we have at 75 Martha, we have up to 40 beds for male identified detox. And then we have 26 beds for female identified folks at River Point, which is just down Main Street a little further. And so their numbers are a little lower due to COVID. Obviously, we can't fit the same amount of people in the same amount of space. So the beds are running at around, I think it's around 20, 25 at each site. So they're down a little bit just because of how we've had to space people out. But we hope, you know, as COVID, you know, slowly we get on top of it and we start winning that battle, we can kind of open more beds. But our detox program is essential. And yeah, and so there's still a bit of a waiting list to get in. I think we're at about a month now from when the first call comes in to when we get people into detox. And so that's it's getting better. I mean, obviously no wait list is preferred, but we only have limited spaces. So yeah, so that's detox. And then we have two kind of transitional housing spaces. At 75 Martha, we have mainstay transitional housing. And then we also have the Bell Hotel across the street on Main, I guess it's Main, close to Main and Higgins, across the street from our other operations. And those are transitional supportive housing. So we have staff in there to support folks. And the idea is they may move from, you know, detox or from another program into the transitional spaces, get stabilized, get their support set up, and then we can move them on to more permanent housing. And yeah, and then we also run a food bank program. So we run a food bank connected to Manitoba Harvest and or Harvest Manitoba. I can't remember the name. I know it just changed, but that's a program where we basically have a storefront at our 661 Main. We have our main office. That's where I work out of on the second floor. And the main floor is a kind of it's built like a grocery store, kind of a vegetable aisle, and folks can register through Harvest and then come in, kind of, you get to kind of shop for your needs versus just the general hamper you get, and you get what you get. So we give people a little bit of choice, and that's totally volunteer ran. So we have volunteers that come in, sort the food and get it all laid out nice, and it's quite you know, a great experience to watch, just to see how the great work of volunteers. And then just because you need a food hamper or need food doesn't mean that that process can't be provided in a way where you get a little bit of choice and providing that extra dignity in the process of accessing emergency food services. And then out of that, we provide just kind of the general hamper bags for folks that maybe need a little extra. And so that's our kind of food bank. We have a clothing bank program as well that basically we take in clothing donations and then kind of put them into bundles and packages, and then those go to shelter, those go to detoxins, they go to wherever people need what we need in terms of internal program. We get so many donations, we can't actually even handle all the donations we get, but so we do have a limit on kind of what we accept right now. We primarily take like underwear, socks, jeans, those kind of core things that people need. We just can't store everything. So that's one of the great things about Winnipeg being so generous, is just you can't always accept all the donations that come in all the time. So food bank, clothing bank, and then we have our van outreach program. So our van outreach has been running for almost 3 years now. It's a 24/7 on the road van service. So that's 2 staff doing outreach. We've had some challenges keeping it on the road all the time, and that's kind of one of the things we'll probably maybe talk about later. But our van outreach is out there. They drive around the city, so we cover the whole city of Winnipeg. And they do a couple of things. One is, check in on folks that are coming across. So they may see people in crisis or people, out on the street when it's cold with not the proper clothing. They'll stop, they'll provide them service, food, access to harm reduction supplies, and kind of support. So they may transport them back to shelter if they want to come back to shelter, or to somewhere else in the community. So the van provides kind of that key service. And then we also work with the City of Winnipeg quite closely. So we provide voluntary transport for the Winnipeg Police Service, Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. So they can call us when they're at a scene. Maybe someone, is in a bus shack or somewhere on the street that they've been called to, and they respond. But they don't need emergency transport to hospital, or they don't need, the police aren't detaining them for any reason. So they'll call us and we'll come do a transport for them, either like to a shelter, to wherever, maybe back to their home or wherever they're staying, and kind of provide that support. So that kind of helps free up emergency response services for the police and fire departments. And then we can kind of provide that transport when there's no need for an emergency service transport. And then we also do kind of encampment responses. So we're going and monitoring encampments. So whenever a new one pops up, maybe, the city will hear about it, or they'll call us and we'll go down, we'll check it out. We may know those people, or if not, our staff will build connections and kind of figure out what their needs are, figure out if there's an opportunity to move them into a more stable housing situation, and provide them with support. And then also when encampments get abandoned, then we'll let the city know so they can come and do a cleanup. So that kind of service of not just, kicking people out of where they're at, but figuring out a way to kind of transition them out so they're in a better place to stay. And then I also, so the van's on the road 24/7, but I also forgot we also do protective care. That's protective care for the City of Winnipeg, the intoxication person detention area. So when people are detained by police intoxicated, instead of going to jail or remand, or they'll get brought to us and they'll have a place to safe sober. And then we'll provide monitoring support for them there. And then if they need, after they're sober, we can figure out if they need, back home or into shelter or wherever other service they need. So it's kind of a good community partnership to provide an opportunity to not kind of just arrest people for being intoxicated, but give them a different option to come into our agency and kind of get the kind of support and care that we can provide to the community. So that's a quick summation of what we do. But then also because of COVID, we also do
take a breath and
yeah.
That's a lot.
Because of COVID, we also took on the isolation spaces. So we're running 2 isolation spaces for the homeless sector. So we can house up to 90 people at any time between the 2 locations if they need to isolate due to a positive COVID test or being named as a contact. So that's been a big expansion, and adding the isolation has been a challenge. I mean, obviously COVID has been a challenge for everybody this year, but that's been a kind of a new addition that is a temporary, hopefully not forever, but we also understand that the need for isolation will probably continue for most of this year, if not until everyone's vaccinated and we have a stronger response in the general public. But yeah, so that's kind of a new thing this year, is taking on isolation for the homelessness sector.
I mean, that's impressive, and my gosh, it was even more than I thought. And I've been there a few times, and the spaces that you've opened up and such. First and foremost, I have to, thank you, your volunteers and your staff, because the workload you have taken on is just unbelievable. And I don't know what we would do without organization like yourself. I really don't. So Main Street, it's much, 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 much more than a shelter, and I'm happy to hear that people are donating. That's fantastic, and I know that we try to bring down coffee as much as possible, the coffee grounds and stuff, so that there's always coffee there and so on. But let's talk about. I mean, you identified a couple of services, and I know funding is always an issue. But for the van, let's talk about that one first, because that is something that you came to council about. Now, the police can call you, or Winnipeg Fire paramedics can call you, and you'll come and deal with the situation in a humane way, and you'll work with the people to get them somewhere they need to be, wherever that may be. Does the city pay you for each one of those calls?
No, we currently don't get any funding from the city at all for any of our van operations. So yeah, so we don't get any funding, which I think voluntary transport started in 2018, and I think originally there was hope that multiple groups would kind of work together on making this happen for the city, so it wouldn't be a huge task on any one organization. But it ended up panning out that we were the only group kind of providing voluntary transport, and so so currently the city doesn't support it financially in any ways. And so that's one of the things that's why I came to council, because we feel strongly that, the service is super important, and, the conversations around defund the police and looking at alternatives. This is a great alternative. I mean, having a 24-hour service that's, in the community, based in the community, and really led by the community, gives it an alternative response to emergency response services. And I don't think anyone disagrees that police aren't emergency social services. They're police. They have a very specific role, and so by having a community-based group do provide this and be able to provide it 24 hours a day and is super essential. And so yeah, we think that specifically the city should provide direct kind of core funding to support this work, and it's really a drop in the bucket when you look at kind of total city operations or investment in other areas. What we need to run the van isn't super expensive, or kind of an unwieldy cost that would be unheard of to find the funding for. This year we're asking for $400,000. We keep it on the road 24 hours a day for the rest of the year with our other funding we have, and so that's and then that's two staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's like mostly it's just staffing costs, because keeping good people in the van and having people out there responding is key, and so that's really what the funding is needed for.
So I'm sorry, how much did you say it was per year to operate?
Well, so the ideal budget is about $800,000 for the year. That's kind of everything. That includes 2 caseworkers built into the van, which is really important, and I don't want to diminish that, but at a minimum with just outreach workers and no caseworkers, it's about $600,000. We have $200,000 funding confirmed for the year, so we're asking the city for $400,000 for this year to help us keep the van on the road for this year. So yeah, ideally it's about $800,000 for a 24-hour van on the road, and I bet you can't find a cheaper option. And if you look at the cost to keep a police car or an ambulance on the road during those times, we're a very cheap option with a low cost.
Well, you're much more economical. I can tell you that. I am. You know what? I'm shocked that that the city isn't making the investment and right away. I know that it's being reviewed. I think council, approved to have the public service look into it and do a report. I'll keep I'm not really one known to keep my opinions to myself, but this to me was, as the young people say, a no-brainer. I mean, really, because this is an investment into our community and into our residents. Homeless people that are dealing with crisis are our residents. It's our community, and if we're going to ask a service like yourself to take on the responsibility of helping and providing comfort and providing respect and providing humanity, we need to, we're obligated, I believe, to support you with that function, because you're right. To have a police call, a police officer respond and deal with that situation is not what we want to do. They might respond to make sure everybody's safe and go so that you can do your work. And that comes at a cost. It doesn't really matter to me who provides the service, but it comes at a cost. And something that I think we should do, I know it's going to be a couple of months before they come back. Is that going to be too long? Like, will we lose any service during this time?
Well, yeah. So as of April 1st, we have to pull back our daytime service. So that means during from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. we won't have response on the street. The van, like, we have a peer program. So we have peers that have lived with lived experience that do outreach, primarily focused on harm reduction and STBBI, kind of connecting folks to testing and treatment. So we still will have some form of outreach, but we won't be able to take the voluntary transport calls. And we'll be part of our daytime service. Well, the van will still be out there kind of doing the peer outreach piece. They won't be responding to the calls from Winnipeggers or from 311 or from the police or fire paramedics until 5 p.m. And then we have one grant from End Homelessness Winnipeg through the Reaching Home funds from the federal government to keep our nighttime shift on. So from midnight to 7 a.m. that's funded. And then our eating staff, we've been able to get donations from the public. So it's private donors providing donations. And we're just wrapping up a fundraising DIY walk event that has just raised, well, it doesn't wrap up for another few days, but it's at about $33,000 fundraised from the public through people doing walks and kind of raising money from their peers. And so real DIY kind of peer supported. So that that'll be probably close to $40,000 when we get to the end of March. And so that'll allow us to keep the evening staff on for another 6 months. But if we don't get funding, in the fall, we'll be looking at more reductions. So right now, the big reduction is as of April 1st, we'll lose daytime kind of call response service on the street. So that's the biggest reduction. And obviously, yeah, like, we'd love to not have to do that and to have the team on the street 24 hours a day. That's what we want, and that's our goal. And we're going to work towards that, but we just can't. We don't have the money, so we can't do it without that. So,
I'm so sorry. This really should be dealt with right away. I don't think it's a question of whether or not the city has a fund. We have to find it. We have to reallocate funds to a service like this. Unfortunately, we're not, as a city councillor, we don't have the budget to do that. But we have a small amount of a budget to kick in. And I'll tell you right now, I will throw in $1,000 from my office budget.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that you get that. It's not from me, it's from the ward, it's from the people of Charleswood, Tuxedo, and Westwood. But I know that that's where they would want the office, the money to go to, and I want to make sure that I can at least, on behalf of them, provide some funding. And certainly, I'll do everything I can to promote your fundraiser as well, and see if we can't get some private sector donors to step up right now to help. But we have to look at this as an investment into our residents and our city, because it is going to cost us, as you alluded to. But people need to understand this. When you stop your daytime, which is unfortunate that has to happen, it's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars a day. And maybe 20s, maybe it could rack up to $100,000 or more in a day, depending on how many calls the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service has to contend with, or the Winnipeg Police Service. And are those the right people to go? We've already established they're not.
I totally agree. And I think, like some of the things we do is, we provide, when we go out to the encampments, we've worked with the city and the fire paramedics folks to look at fire safety. So we actually do training for folks in encampment to make sure they're not, putting themselves at risk of a fire, which, if a fire happens, we had a tragic one this year. We lost a life over the winter, and that's to me, that's unacceptable, that we should be in a situation ever to lose life because we're not responding properly to this situation. So like by providing fire safety, I'm sure like in this past year, we probably prevented, hundreds if not thousands of fires out there just by providing that fire safety to folks as we're doing our outreach and working with the WFPS, so that the response isn't on the back end when something's on fire, but ahead of time to make sure folks have the right fire prevention training, have the right stuff, so they're not putting themselves at risk or those around them. So there's huge cost savings, and I think it's you don't even have to make a stretch to talk about how much a $400,000 investment from the city now would save well over double that, if not more, over the next year, right? So, and I mean, obviously, there's nothing stopping council from approving money sooner than the 60 days that was moved. So, that's your world. So,
and then what happens after? I mean, you get the report in 60 days, hoping that they don't request an extension of time, which is the most common thing you hear at the City of Winnipeg. We need an extension. So it could be even longer. But I'll tell you, I'm going to take care and make sure that I speak to the right individuals within our department to make sure that the $1,000, and then I'm going to issue a challenge to all of my council colleagues and to the mayor. So that would be to each give $1,000, which should put you at $15,000. And I'm going to challenge the mayor to double that because he has a much larger budget. Not necessarily get into that, but to double that right now so that we can hopefully get into your pocket $17,000 right away. That would have us, it's a start to help, keeping some of your programs going during this time. It's not going to bring back the daytime. I understand that. But we also need to start advocating to pass by this. We don't need to do this. If we can find the money in the budget, we have to, because this would just be good business as well as anything else. If you want to spend all your money on policing and fire paramedic services to deal with an issue that quite possibly could make it worse, or do you want to deal with this, the proper way and with dignity and humanity at pennies on the dollar?
Yeah, I mean, we always encourage investment in prevention work. Is it's the return on investment is huge, and that's where the investment should be made. It makes way more sense than having a back end of emergency response and crisis that could be preventable, right? We won't prevent every call or every fire, but we'll prevent a lot of them, and we'll also be able to support those most vulnerable in our city. And I think, Winnipeggers are amazing, and that I know as well, but Winnipeggers step up all the time. And so this is an area where I think, government, where we're providing direct service should really should heed our citizens' direction and support this service going forward.
Well, I don't even think it's a question, my friend, because the very first thing that happens if there's a person that has set up a little encampment and we want to call to have them looked after and have somebody respond to that and check it out, we're told you're going to get the call. So why aren't we paying for that? I mean, we're quick to put it on you, and we're quick to hand the responsibility over to you and to point the finger saying, well, Main Street is looking after that. They'll have everything under control. but we cannot continue to say that now because we're not funding you. And it should be, people should know that this is a big issue. This is if you listened earlier to the podcast and all of the things Jamel and all the staff and volunteers do at Main Street, $400,000 or $800,000 out of the city's $1.5 billion budget is ridiculously small. We did a research last year of all the money that we pay on consultants. And my goodness, we are talking in the millions and millions of dollars. Why could we not reallocate funds from consultants and move them over to actually address an issue and help make the city better? Because consultants, I don't know if you've heard this before, Jamel, but I had a colleague that I worked with when I was in the private sector that drew a happy face, just the simple little happy face, and said, "Do you know what that is?" And I was, "No, I don't." Well, that is a Picasso painting after a consultant got to it. So I don't want to downplay the need for some consultants, and the need for that is quite important in some areas of the city, but this takes priority.
Well, and I also think, we can provide you better data than any consultant will. We can tell you where people are, how many people we're seeing, what their needs are. Like we'll give all those reports because we track all that stuff, right? So we have good stats, and that information I think is just as valuable as most consultants report. We can put a cover page on it and too. And but we track all this stuff because this stuff is important for us to know as well. We don't just do it for our funders. We do it for what are the key indicators that we're looking to achieve, and we track our stats and do a very good job of kind of being able to show how many calls we're getting and where they're coming from, and that's, so those reports can be used just as valuable by City Council, and so you can consider a consultant report with just some action behind it and some on the ground work. So if you want to, I can change the title of the proposal to
you should
street consultant report, and if that helps, then we'll do that.
Yeah.
Also explore a fee per call service too, but I think that'll get much more costly for the city if we look at that model.
Well, maybe that's a model you have to put forward to get them to react, because if they're not going to provide you the support, and I'm part of the city, then they should be paying a fee for service. This is, again, let's get back to investing in the people of Winnipeg. This is so beneficial for everybody that it's about priorities. We have to get things done. We have to see, focus on the best outcome for Winnipeggers. This is the best outcome you could ever imagine from the use of city funds. And I don't say that just because you're on the call, or listen, not a lot of people know because I don't talk about it publicly. But I was, we lost our mom. She was murdered. And we went through, some pretty difficult times when we were young. And I remember staying at a shelter for a couple of days because I was out of a place to go, and had young brothers and all that stuff. So there's a million reasons why somebody needs help. And for people to think, oh, it's only because of addiction is wrong. It's not always because of addiction. Addiction might come because no one's helping. So are you going to address the problem and just try to cover it up with a Band-Aid, or are you going to get to the root of the problem and really make a difference? And that's what I think we're doing wrong. I'm getting, I have to be careful because I'm getting somewhat upset that this, the last year at the stroke of a pen, put over $1 million into more legal expenses for cases that we lost. That we shouldn't have been fighting in the first place. And here we're doing a report. It's wrong. It's wrong, Jamel. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But
sorry to hear about your situation there. And but I think I also want to be clear, our services are super important and essential for the city, and we're an emergency shelter, but we're not the solution to the homelessness problem, and we are not necessarily Band-Aid, because we're a little better than whatever Band-Aid provides, but the solution to homelessness is housing and better housing support. So We do have our transitional housing services and detox and addiction support programs. Like those are a lot of key ways to kind of address the broader problems, and we do a lot of that through our work in shelter. But no one on our staff or in our board or anyone will say that emergency shelter is a solution to homelessness, and that's not it. And so we're happy to work with great partners like End Homelessness Winnipeg and all the other outreach folks out there. Like we're not the only outreach van on the street. I tried to make that clear to council that we're not trying to compete with other outreach vans. We provide a very direct service to the city through our outreach service, but we work in coordination with all the outreach services. With Mama Bear Clan, Bear Clan. We coordinate that. We call them when we can't get to places if they can go when they're on the road, right? So like. The Winnipeg has such a great not-for-profit community, and as a whole, we're trying to all work on this broader solution to the problem. And I think the city, if they take any direction, is to really look at the not-for-profit sector where people are working, and not just volunteer sector as well. Like people are out there in the streets in Winnipeg, they're doing all the hard work, and with like a proper investment, in some key coordination pieces and supporting key services like the van patrol on the road all the time, 24/7, allows better coordination of all those services. And no one's asking the city to take it all on and do it themselves. Like that's not what the community wants. That's not what Winnipeggers want. We just want to support to do our jobs well, and we'll take it and run with it. We have good strategies out there. We have strategies to end homelessness. We just need those investments in the key places. And so, we're a part of a much broader, sector that's working very hard to address, the critical issues that our city faces. And I say this all the time, but Winnipeg is a great city, a great place, and the problems we have here aren't unsolvable. They're not, we're not looking at, millions and millions of people that, we don't have the space or the housing stock available to address these things. We have this stuff here, and I think with a better investment and a little more support for the not-for-profit sector and those doing this work would go a long way in terms of solving a lot of the kind of broader systemic issues we face as a city.
Well, very well said. And I have explained it when I've spoken to certain groups in the past and talked about it during my first campaign this year, is that governments have to start looking at these issues that we're having, or looking at solutions as investments. Because if you imagine if the government invested, in total, if you got all three levels of government or whatever, to invest $100 million, let's say, I'm just picking a number out of the air, to build affordable housing and to do it properly and to work with groups like yourself, because you can build the affordable housing, but if we don't have a group like yourself or the others that do outreach, developing that relationship with these individuals that are looking for some support and dignity, then they're going to be afraid to go to those places, or they'll be cautious of that. And I understand that. So you need both to kind of intertwine. But if you got the government to look at it as an investment, instead of going, that's a lot of money, $100 million is a lot of money. But if you look at the payoff or the return on that investment in human lives and in your community, if you're spending $25,000 for every police call or fire paramedic call, you're going to pay that $100 million. That $100 million is going to give you a return on investment very quickly, more so than it would in the private sector, I dare to say, because you will see a result. And then you have members of our community that feel good about themselves, that feel they're a part of the community, that feel respected. They become contributing members to the economy for the governments, even quicker for your payoff.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Maybe it's me. I look at that and think, this is so simple. Like, it's so simple. Why aren't we, just looking at it? Okay, we need to invest in the issue today, so that in 5, 10, 15 years, it's all good. We've dealt with we've gotten to the core of the issue and everything is fine. But again, I go off on a tangent a bit because I don't understand the way politics works when it comes to that. It's wrong. But I assure you, I promise you, I'm going to do everything that I can to advocate on your behalf and to see if we can't push this funding through. Every day that we go without having your service is a day that we are disrespecting, in my opinion. We're disrespecting residents of Winnipeg and we're ignoring a problem that we know exists. We're simply ignoring it. So often if I push something through as a motion, the rest of council gets, and the EPC gets a little taken back by that, and they'll rewrite it and address it their way. Maybe that's what I'll do, is I'll put together a motion. I don't care if they take mine, as long as they get off there and get something done. That's all I'm worried about. So stay tuned for that, Jamal. Yeah,
we're looking forward to it.
Now I have a challenge for this week. I much appreciate it. I know we have to go, but quick question about the, I know that you offer the places for detox, not the overall detox, but at night when the police will bring somebody there instead of to jail. Again, what a great concept. This is the way to treat people. Everyone makes mistakes. We all have. Anybody who says they haven't, I would question. We have all made mistakes. Do you get paid for that service by the city?
Yeah, we fund, it comes from the Winnipeg Police Service, so it's, we don't quite get enough to run it year round. So we do run a deficit in that program of about $100,000 every year. We're working with the police service to address that. We've had some initial meetings and are trying to address that there's been a deficit every year for that program. And so we do get funding for the core operation of the program, but the things that just provides, the core funding for the staffing, and we have to maintain a critical staffing level of 2 staff at all times. And that's to ensure that no police have to wait for more than 30 minutes to get someone inside. There's a processing time and obviously, and so because of that, we run to overtime staffing, and then two is kind of what we're funded for, but we end up having, 4 or 5 staff on during, busier nights and those times where, people are maybe celebrating a bit more for special events or things like that. So yeah, like that program does run a deficit and we're trying to address it, but we also, no matter what, we'll always make sure folks have water and food, and those aren't things we're funded to provide, but we make sure they happen. And so that's why we always, you'll always see us doing call outs a few times a year for water bottles. And those are kind of those key things that we always need donations of water bottles and those kind of things that can just provide that extra bit when someone's, trying to sober up and need that, we may not have the money to buy water all the time, but Winnipeggers never let us go dry in terms of our stock of donated water bottles. So it's always something great. But yeah, the funding does come from the WFPS and provides kind of the core funding, but we don't have any, we do run a deficit in that program as well. So.
Well, I was the chair of the police board, and one of my very big pet peeves is the City of Winnipeg charges the police $10 million a year for rent of the headquarters. So they give them the $10 million and the police have to give it back. Which is not necessary. You can do it through different accommodations and such. It's an old school way of that corporations used to run, with all the money going back to the corporate office to make everybody in corporate look like heroes. But it's unnecessary use of funds. Quickly, they could make sure that you're whole by eliminating just that. Imagine if they just eliminated that rent. And let's say they only took 50% of it. Well, a lot of problems would be solved right there. And the police, whenever they buy anything, just so you're aware, they have to pay an administrative fee. So, and that administrative fee can be anywhere from 10 to 30%. Eliminate that administration fee, because we're already paying the staff. The administration fee doesn't help. There's nothing there again, to fund corporate. If you eliminated that, we could make you whole, because at the end of the day, your service is providing something. Administrative fees are nothing more than a creation of a slush fund in case you're over budget in another area. And that's the truth. So there's ways to find this funding. So I hope you keep talking about it, and I hope that the public or anybody listening or watching this, starts to send emails to their counselors, because the status quo of the way things are operating has to end. We need to invest in your services and others to make a difference.
And I would also add, if we didn't have to, go for funding and make all these presentations and advocate for ourselves all the time, we could do I can spend much more time on our core work and providing better service. And, like we have to put a lot of effort in to make sure we have enough money to cover our costs every year. And I know this isn't a unique situation for us. It's every not-for-profit in our city. But if there were ways to, eliminate that time we have to spend making our cases for why we need money, we could spend a lot more on making sure our programs were best possible they can, right? And that's where we want to be working. We don't want to be working on funding proposals and
politics.
Return on investment calculations and all that stuff. Like we want to be doing the work we're here to do and supporting the people that we serve every day. And that's why we're here, and that's what we want to do. And so we play this unnecessary at times game to make sure we get there and we get the support we need, and we don't want to be adversarial in that. Like we're not looking for a fight or to pit one not-for-profit against another or one level of government against other. Like that's not what we want to engage in. We want to show you what we do, make sure you understand the services we provide, and then get supported for that work. And that's what we hope the path forward looks like for our city and our funding structures. And I hope that we can work closely with the city. We're happy to provide these services. They make sense that they're in the community and not ran by the city, or they make sense in the community. And there's probably 10 or 15 or 100 other options that the city could look at where we can have these community partnerships and make great things happen. I know, like if you look at the West End 24-hour safe space running out of the Meg Slyson Rec Center, there's a great example of a city facility just doing things a little differently and working with a community group to make that happen. And so I think there's lots of great opportunities. And but yeah, if we were just funded at the right levels to do our work, we'd be much happier and do a lot better work and more work, right? We could do more work out there. We could provide more supports. We could support people through, the difficulties they're having and giving them that love and care that everyone needs in our city, and especially those most vulnerable.
Deserve.
Yes.
Love and care everybody deserves. So that's, it's funny because I've in the past worked and still kind of involved a little bit with a medical research company in the US and with professors. And many of these professors are working on some incredible advancements in medical science, but have to spend 80% of their time writing grants and hoping to get funding grants, and only 20% of the time on our issues. How no one sees this as the biggest problem ever is beyond me, but that's governments. Listen, we've spent a lot of time on this, Jamel, and it has been an honor speaking with you. Watch for that $1,000. If you don't, we'll get that to you right away, and we'll do the challenge, and hopefully that'll work. And we'll push to get you some more funding. I can assure you that although the city might not be handing over the check that they should be, what you do in this city is so people are grateful everywhere I go. It is nothing but kind words about Main Street and the work that you do and your staff, and all your volunteers. So it is incredible, and we just have to make it more important and treat it with the respect that you treat others with, because we do count on you for an awful lot. So I will do everything that I can. I assure you that. If it was my decision, I'll tell you right now, I would have written the check already. It really is it's an investment. It makes nothing. The fact that you need 60 days to do a report on that, we can solve it in 60 seconds. We know how much it's going to save. We know how much it means to the community. I hear and I see counselors, always talking about, people living in the bus shelters and issues in the bus shelter. Well, you address that in what you're doing to help individuals in our community. So instead of us talking about it and trying to hide from it, again, we could be providing you more support through that means. And it is something that we should talk about. If you are doing more construction and capital, there are other grants available that I would be making sure that we could help you with. So we'll chat about that offline or whatever. And I've gone on far too long. You know what, Jamel, thank you so much. The work you're doing is incredible. I think we have an amazing individual within yourself at the helm of this project. I know there's a number of amazing staff and volunteers but they need a good leader, and you're the leader that I think is needed. And I hope that it usually tells me when we're at an hour. And I hope that you get more and more support, and geez, just thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, I just want to say we have such amazing staff and orders, and while I'm in this kind of lead role, it's all of the people that work our front lines that do the amazing work. And I always say to everybody I see that we should be judged on our frontline work, not our head office kind of work. It's important and needed, but the quality of the service we provide based on our frontline folks, and they're the real heroes in our city and in our community. And so I feel super fortunate to be here and be in this role and take that on. But it's our frontline service workers and that are out there dealing with a new crisis every day, and making sure that folks have love, care, and support every day. And it's amazing to be a part of this organization and a part of kind of that work happening in our city. So I'm very grateful to be here, and I appreciate the conversation. And hopefully, next time we talk, we're talking about how we're putting our van back on the road during the day.
That's what I'm hoping for. Thanks again.
Thanks.